Hey everyone, welcome back to Reason and Theology. Doing another segment here for our playlist, Reason and Reactions, where we take a look at things that are going on in the news and I comment on it. Today, we're seeing massive news of a German bishop resigning out of frustration, out of fatigue, out of concerns for the direction that the German Catholic bishops have gone. We're talking about a German bishop who is one of the few who has been resisting the problems of the German bishops and their synodal path. He's become so frustrated that he said, you know what? I'm resigning and I'm going back to just being a simple priest. And today, actually, just a few days ago, I should say, Pope Leo accepted his resignation. One of the few good bishops left in Germany just quit. And Leo accepted that resignation instead of rejecting it. Let's see what the bishop says, what his concerns are, what he is frustrated with. Before we dive in specifically to take a look at him in his own words, I want to remind you, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. Helps me out tremendously. Let me share my screen and show you a couple articles that are starting to cover this information. It isn't being covered enough. This is likely the first time that you've heard about this, but the news actually broke just a few days ago. So for some reason, there is a delay in people reporting on this, but we do have a few sources that are talking about it and quoting him directly. So we'll see what he says in his own words. German bishop who refused involvement in the Synodal Committee resigns at 70 years old. That's, of course, 5 years before the mandatory resignation. At the age of 75, as a bishop, you have to resign, and then the Pope can either accept it or reject it. He went ahead and resigned early because he just says, I can't do this anymore. This is just too much. He's been resisting the way that the German bishops have been going, the direction they've been going with the synodal path. He's been fighting against it, but he says, I just can't do it anymore. Now, you'll recall, I've been covering the situation with the German bishops for several years now, thoroughly documenting the complexity of that situation. And in fact, in a previous video, I went over how the German bishops in their synod voted in favor of a number of documents that outright teach heresy and abandon the deposit of faith. I pointed this out and said, this is insane. Here you have Catholic bishops abandoning orthodoxy explicitly in their own judgments. And it's become a situation that can just no longer be tolerated. And I've pointed out and often actually added some criticisms of the Vatican and even Pope Francis in not addressing the situation. So we've covered that previously. We've seen that, but that's the backdrop behind this German bishop being frustrated with what's going on with the synodal path. Several years ago, they voted in favor of a bunch of heresies. I put a link to it in the show notes where I reviewed an article covering all of the documents that they approved of that possess and contain heretical statements in them. You can imagine if you're a good bishop in Germany, or you're one of like the few, 3, arguably 4, now 2, arguably 3. If you're one of the few Orthodox Catholic bishops in Germany, you're going to be incredibly frustrated with the situation while your brother bishops are teaching every form of modernism, progressivism, and heresy that you could imagine. And it looks like it broke this bishop. It's a very sad situation. Let's continue. Pope Leo has accepted the resignation of Bishop Gregor Maria Hunk, I guess is how you pronounce it. Please correct me for all you Germans out there. I know we got some German Catholics watching. Please correct me um, if I've mispronounced his name. We'll just call him Bishop Greor just to be safe, right? Pope Leo has accepted that resignation. I did verify that on the Vatican website. I saw it here. This is for July 8th. His resignation was accepted. So it's about 3 days old, and most people aren't really, picking up on this for some reason. But I've also pointed out that they also haven't picked up on some of the more recent appointments that Pope Leo has made that are pretty controversial. The Holy Father has accepted the resignation from the pastoral care of the Diocese of Eichstätt, Germany, presented by Bishop Greor. Nothing else about it. Just simply says he accepted it. Now, I kind of wish he had rejected it. You remember when Cardinal Marx, very problematic figure in Germany, you remember when he submitted his resignation to Pope Francis? What did Pope Francis do? He said, no, I'm rejecting your resignation. I'm going to keep you as a bishop. Now, I think many people agree he probably should have accepted that resignation. Right? But if you're going to reject someone's resignation, it probably shouldn't be Cardinal Marx. You should have rejected this one, in my opinion. Talking here about the papacy. I really think the papacy should have rejected this one and said, hey, no, we need you in there. You're one of the solid few. You're one of the people resisting this stuff that, we here in the Vatican have been writing against. Pope Francis has been speaking against. This Synodal Way of Germany, Rome has been fighting against and speaking against. You can argue it hasn't been fighting enough, but it has been. It has been pushing back against them. You would have hoped that the Pope would have said, no, what are you doing? We need you in there. This is the critical moment where you got to be in there. Unfortunately, he chose a different path and went ahead and accepted his resignation. Let's continue with the article. Bishop Greor was one of the few German bishops who announced recently that they will not participate in the work of a synodal committee that has been established by the Episcopal Conference, despite opposition from the Vatican. You heard that right. I mean, the German bishops, as I've been documenting, have been outright, explicitly thumbing their nose at Rome and saying, you know what, Rome, you're telling us not to do this, but we're going to keep doing it. And they really put it in full gear when Pope Francis died. That's when they really pressed on the gas. They took that opportunity during that interregnum period. And when he went even further with their agenda, when there is no pope. And now that there is a new pope, Pope Leo, there hasn't been any indication that they're letting up. No indication that they're pumping on the brakes. Maybe that's one of the reasons why this bishop just said, you know what, I can't take this anymore. Maybe he kind of felt like, well, maybe things will change with the new pope. And so far he hasn't seen those changes. Maybe he just felt like, can't do this anymore. This should have been addressed as, within the first week of this pontificate. I don't know. But clearly he's frustrated, and he's going to express that in his own words. Speaking of him and 4 other German bishops refusing involvement in the Synodal Committee, there's this article really quickly here. 4 German Catholic bishops have announced that they will not participate in the work of a synodal committee that has been established by the Episcopal Conference, despite opposition from the Vatican. The Vatican has told them, shut this thing down. You have no actual authority to engage in these synods. You have no authority to continue with this. They say, no, we're going to continue. Well, a few German bishops resisted. He's among one of them, Bishop Greor. Cardinal Wolke is another one of them. I did a video on him recently where, a number of people, about 61,000 people, are asking for his resignation because they feel that he lied under oath. At least that's what the secular authorities said, that he lied under oath in situations involving sex abuse cover-up. So a lot of people have asked for his resignation. So already one of the few who is standing against the German bishops. Some feel he's compromised. Now Bishop Greor is gone. You're left with really just 2 bishops fighting against this. Rudolph of Regensburg and Stefan of Passau. They joined in a statement that proposed committee cannot claim any ecclesiastical competence over the church in Germany and will have no authority to direct diocesan bishops to adopt new forms of leadership or new approaches in teaching and morality. They just don't have authority over bishops in their territories. Back to the main article, Bishop Greor said that he offered his resignation to Pope Francis shortly before Easter and that he was moved by a desire to return to simple pastoral work. So what he's saying is he actually brought this to Pope Francis and said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be a bishop anymore. Pope Francis basically said, okay, I'll accept your resignation, but at a later date to be determined. At a later time to be determined. He didn't determine when. He just told them, like, continue to do what you do, but we'll figure something out as to when I'll let you go. Well, obviously, Pope Francis passed away, and that never happened. So it looks like Pope Leo, instead of maybe rejecting that resignation, just went ahead and went with it as of 3 days ago. In his own words, being close to people as pastor, that's what I want to realize in the remaining, hopefully, sprightly years of my life as Father Greor. He wants to be known as Father Greor. Before I return to my monastic community later on, he said, I won't hide the fact that I feel an inner fatigue after many challenges, scandals, and unresolved conflicts. What are some of those unresolved conflicts? There's a number of them. One of them is the Synodal Way. He feels that situation is just out of hand. It's deviated from the gospel. It's deviated from the deposit of faith, and really nothing's being done to address it. Looking at another article here, German bishop resigns, citing inner fatigue, Synodal Way doubts. The German bishop resigned 5 years before the typical requirement age on Sunday, citing inner fatigue and expressing doubts that the country's Synodal Way will lead to true renewal. Bishop Greor stood down as the bishop of Eichstätt in Bavaria, southern Germany, June 8th, saying he hoped to serve as a pastor and to be known as Father Greor and no longer wear episcopal insignia. He was one of the few German diocesan bishops to criticize the country's controversial Synodal Way, which called for sweeping changes to Catholic teaching and practice and to reject plans to establish a national synodal body with extensive powers over the church in Germany. He was a Benedictine monk who has led the diocese with more than 350,000 Catholics since 2006. He told diocesan employees in a June 8th letter that his decision to resign had a long history. It's been a long time coming. It's been building up for a while, it looks like. He says, I am now in my 19th year as Bishop of Eichstätt, and in terms of years of service, ranked third among the diocesan bishops of the German Bishops' Conference. So he has a pretty prominent place, or had a prominent place there among the German bishops. However, I do not want to hide the fact that after the many challenges, scandals, and unresolved conflicts which were not lacking during my time as bishop, I feel an inner fatigue. And I agree with you with that super chat. Thank you so much for that, Matthew Schmidt. Pope Leo should take this as a sign that something needs to be done. Exactly. When he received this resignation request, should have taken that as a sign something is really deeply wrong when an Orthodox bishop is submitting his resignation due to fatigue and fighting heretic German bishops. Instead, he accepted the resignation, and I just don't know if that was the right move. I feel like keep him in there. He's one of the few fighting. Maybe encourage him. Tell him, hey, I know that you're feeling that fatigue on the inside. I get it, but you can't give up. Don't give up. It seems like you should have told him, like, no, what are you thinking? How could you think of resigning? How could you think of giving up? You're such an important influence in this situation, and you're one of the few pushing back against this problem with the German bishops. Don't leave. We need more of you. Bishop Greor, who took a break from his duties due to surgery in 2024, noted that crises during his tenure included a dispute over his decision to block the appointment of a president at the Catholic University of Eichstätt in his territory, a financial scandal that caused enormous reputational damage in our diocese, and clerical abuse cases. He was clearly against this appointment, and it looks like he lost that battle. He said he had also been deeply concerned in recent years about the question of the spiritual fruitfulness of the church in our country. He feels like the German church has lost its way, and it's not producing the fruit that it needs to produce. Maybe its candlestick is about to be removed, if we're going to use a reference from the book of Revelation. The Catholic Church in Germany is well organized with its structures and committees and has many competent employees. Through its social structure, it continues to prove influential despite the decline in the number of believers. It's a significant social player, he wrote. Given the upheaval and the decline, we are necessarily developing pastoral programs and concepts for the future. But to what extent is our system of the church in Germany proving spiritually fruitful, so that it promotes a new beginning rooted in the power of the lived gospel and serves the sanctification of the world? What a great question. That's a nice way of him saying, yeah, all this synodal garbage that we're doing to deal with the problem of the church in Germany isn't following the gospel. And it isn't helping the world. It's fighting against the gospel. It's fighting against the sanctification of the world by trying to be like the world. It was a really kind, a really nice way to say the German church has abandoned the gospel. The German church no longer preaches the gospel and is no longer there as a shining light to the people in Germany. It's fascinating and yet also heartbreaking to see a bishop be so candid. I mean, I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate how candid he's being, but it's so heartbreaking to see that, to see a person who's just so burned out, who's so fatigued by the situation. My heart goes out to him. I could only imagine what that's like by being a bishop and you're trying to walk the path of the message of the Catholic Church and the message of the gospel, just to be undermined constantly by your brother bishops. And for nothing to be done about it, for them to continue to do what they're doing with no resistance, no meaningful resistance, I should say. As I've pointed out, yes, Rome has been telling them, no, don't do this. I mean meaningful resistance from Rome. Sad to see this. He said he had been moved by Pope Francis's 2019 letter to Catholics in Germany. You remember we covered that? Pope Francis just basically bypassed the German bishops, ignored them, and said, let me talk to you faithful there in Germany. And he undermined everything that the German bishops were doing and called the lay German Catholics back to fidelity, since their bishops and their pastors aren't being faithful. Now, that's a great thing, but who has the authority and power to fix that situation with the German bishops and German clergy? Pope Francis, and not Pope Leo. Who holds all the cards? Who has all the power in the church? The Pope. So yes, it's nice to write to the German laity and tell them, hey, your shepherds are doing the wrong thing. You need to follow the gospel. That's great. But who has the authority to do something about those German bishops? The Pope. He's the only one who holds that authority. The lay German Catholics can't do anything about their bishops. Nothing. They have no real power. The one who possesses power is the papacy. So we covered that previously. Now, he says the Pope provided inspiration for a spiritual path that he advised our church in Germany to take, rather than one that revolves around itself. According to Pope Francis, renewal means living from the freshness of the gospel. He spoke of the bite of the gospel, which must be felt, and the primacy of evangelism, which begins with evangelizing oneself, so that new life and genuine spirit inspired by the gospel can be affected. The bishop suggested that Pope Francis's letter captured the true heartbeat of the church, which he said he had encountered through the priests and lay people of his diocese and in the liturgy. Being close to people as a pastor, talking to them about questions of faith and life, preparing young people to receive the sacraments, and offering spiritual guidance, this is what I would like to achieve in the remaining, and I hope, vigorous years of my life as Father Gregory, in the second row in a pastoral area outside our diocese before I later return to my monastic community, he says. And okay, all right, so he's quitting being a bishop. He gave up there, but he still wants to be a pastor, still wants to be a priest who makes a change. But here's the reality. He's going to be a priest under a new bishop. That new bishop may not necessarily be a good one. We'll see. We'll see who's appointed. What if it turns out to be a bishop that's much like the other bishops? That'll be even more difficult for him, because he'll now have to serve under somebody who might end up being a flaming liberal. We'll see how that works out for him. He added, without prejudice to my episcopal ordination, I no longer wish to wear pontificals and insignia, nor perform any pontifical functions, unless my successor occasionally requires support in his episcopal ministry. What a heartbreaking thing to say. He says, I don't want to dress as a bishop anymore. I don't want to function as a bishop anymore. I don't want to act as a bishop in the liturgy anymore. I don't want to wear my mitre. I don't want to wear my episcopal insignia. I don't want to do that anymore. How heartbreaking to see this. That the liberal heretic German bishops have broke this man to the point where he says, I don't even want to be presented as a bishop anymore. I just want to return to being a lowly priest. Not that priests are lowly, but that's kind of how he's portraying it. I want to go back to kind of being a lowly priest in the middle of nowhere is how he's portraying it. Otherwise, I see my place in the coming years in pastoral ministry as Father Gregory. He and the 3 other diocesan bishops who are skeptical about the Synodal Way have faced criticism from lay groups for declining to participate in a future national synodal body. Meanwhile, a petition addressed to Pope Leo XIV calling for the resignation of Cardinal Wolke, which we looked at a few days ago, for allegedly mishandling abuse cases, has gained more than 61,000 signatures. Now, whether he is innocent or guilty on those matters, I discussed what the only outcome for Cardinal Wolke should be. And I based that on actually the New Testament standards for a bishop. Go back and watch that video. Bishop Batzing, chairman of the German Bishops' Conference, thanked Bishop Gregory for often taking a mediating position amid disagreement within the German church. Despite all the tensions you recently mentioned again, I would like to thank you for your participation in the Synodal Way of the Church in Germany, he said in June 8th tribute. I know that you have found this increasingly difficult, but I would like to mention specifically your active presence at the synodal assemblies. So rather than his brother bishop saying, no, hang in there, he's like, yeah, I know it's been tough on you. Yeah, I can see that. But hey, thanks for your service. It continues. Christian Gartner, the chairman of Eichstätt's diocesan council, noted that Bishop Gregory had long advocated a time limit on bishops' tenures. Well, I mean, you kind of have that with the resignation at age 75. He understood his episcopal office as a temporary service to the community of believers. In this respect, his resignation and his intention as he writes to work as a pastor in the future are consistently supported by the same modesty that always distinguishes him in his work as bishop. Well, okay. All right. Maybe there's a time to resign, but is right now the time? Hard to say that the answer is yes. Bishop Gregory, whose hobbies include rock climbing, motorcycling, and watching James Bond movies, is one of a few handful of European bishops who have retired early in recent years, citing the demands of episcopal ministry among their reasons for stepping down. Bishop Lazzari resigned as the Bishop of Lugano, Switzerland, in 2022 at the age of 59, also saying he suffered from inner fatigue. Also in 2022, Monsignor Ivan Briant initially accepted his nomination as an auxiliary bishop in France, but withdrew before his episcopal ordination due to burnout. Some of these people are saying, you know what? I just can't even be a bishop. Some of them are bishops and they're saying, I'm just burned out. I can't be a bishop. And others have accepted being a bishop, but haven't yet been ordained. And they just say before their ordination, I can't do this. I'm going to go ahead and not be ordained because I'm just burned out. It's rare but not unheard of for bishops to step down before the standard retirement age to take up a different ministry in the church. And I would certainly say it's rare because just for the factor of how many people want to give up power. How many people really want to give up power? When you have the power of being a bishop, very few people will want to give that up. Now, here's a bishop who actually did give it up. And you know what? That says something about his character. It shows that he's not power driven. Maybe one of the few. And so that I commend, but I just don't know if this is the time to say, I quit. In Bavaria's 7 Catholic dioceses, bishops and cathedral chapters submit lists of episcopal candidates to the Vatican every 3 years. When a see falls vacant, the local cathedral chapter prepares a new list of candidates, which is typically sent to the Apostolic Nuncio for transmission to the Vatican's dicastery for bishops. The Pope freely selects a candidate, usually from the lists, but the Bavarian state government has the right to veto the Pope's candidate, but rarely exercises this power. Now, that's pretty wild, right? That's kind of a throwback. In this case, the Pope determines who the bishop will be, but the secular government can veto the Pope's power. That's odd, right? So if they don't like who the Pope chose, the secular state government has the authority to say no to what the Bishop of Rome has chosen and then make him go and choose someone else. And this is actually an agreement between Rome and that government. That's pretty wild, right? A lot of implications there. We were talking about Cardinal Marx and how Pope Francis rejected his resignation. Meanwhile, Pope Leo accepts the resignation of Bishop Gregor. If any resignation should have been rejected, it should have been Bishop Gregor's resignation. Unless there's more information hidden behind the scenes, this is one that one should have said, no, we're going to go ahead and decline that request. You're going to stay where you are. You're going to fight this out. The Pope could have done that. He easily could have said no. He easily could have said, whatever agreement you had with Pope Francis, I'm overturning that. I'm the Pope. He can do that. Meanwhile, Cardinal Marx, whose resignation was submitted, that one was rejected, and he is still there and a strong influence in the German Catholic Church. Cardinal Marx, speaking of which, today had a quick little audience with Pope Leo XIV during his morning mass. Take a look at this. You can see a meeting here with him. They're going to zoom in. Looks like they're having some kind of conversation. This is this morning, Cardinal Marx, Pope Leo XIV, having a conversation about something. Pope Leo's smiling. Looks like they're just chatting it up. Cardinal Marx smirks a little bit, smiles a little bit. So it seems like it was a good conversation, whatever it was. And it looks like, according to some people's lip reading, that he says, Pope Leo says, okay, we'll talk later. We'll meet later. I don't know what it's about. Don't know what it's about. But my question is, why is Marx even still there? Why is he and all of the other heretical German bishops still there? What's going on? What's the delay? Why is this happening? Is Pope Leo going to do something about it? Are they going to meet? Is he going to have him resign? Is he going to have the vast majority of German bishops resign? I don't know. We'll find out soon. I guess we'll know very, very, very soon. But it's a sad day to see when an Orthodox bishop throws in the towel and says, I can't do this anymore. And you know what? On the flip side, there are a lot of Catholic men in the church right now that could be great bishops, but they're not chosen as bishops. They could be great leaders in the Catholic Church, but for one reason or another, they're not chosen as bishops. A lot of men sitting on the sidelines, they could do some great things for the church and help get it back on track. Those men are passed over. Other men who, in some cases, probably shouldn't be elevated are elevated. And then some of the few who are on the right track, their resignations are accepted and they're allowed to throw in the towel. So while some bishops are throwing in the towel, there's plenty of other men on the sidelines who say, put me in, coach. I could do a way better job than these guys. But for one reason or another, the church is not choosing those men. It could probably be frustrating for a lot of people all around. Here we have a case of a bishop who's frustrated, but you know what? There's also a lot of laity who are frustrated, especially the laity in Germany who actually want to see the church get back on the right track there in Germany. I imagine they are so frustrated and maybe even disheartened to see this resignation. My heart goes out for them. It's a sad day to see this. Let's see if the situation changes under Pope Leo XIV or if it's more of the same. I suppose that's still to be determined, as it is still pretty early in this pontificate. So let's wait and see. If you appreciated this commentary, you want to see more like it, I need to hear from you. Let me know in the comment section. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I'll certainly do some more. Thank y'all so much for commenting there in the comment section. I've been reading it while also doing this and appreciate your feedback. I want to remind y'all, hit that not only subscribe button, the join button right here on YouTube, right next to the subscribe button to become a channel member. You get access to exclusive Patreon-only content, and it supports the channel out tremendously. Also, you can check me out at Patreon if you don't want to do the membership here through YouTube. Same extra Patreon-only content through Patreon. Patreon.com/Reason and Theology. Eric says he really appreciates the video. Thank you so much. Al too says, I think the German bishops would be exceptional at making rosaries in a Vatican basement. I'm sure there's some use that the Pope could find for them, but being in ministry is not one of them. And every day that they remain in ministry, I think, is an indictment on the papacy. And I say that of the previous pontificate and of this one. But let's see if that changes. Maybe it's too soon. Maybe we'll see a big change. If so, you will hear from me right away. I'll go live immediately and let you know if something changes with the situation. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. See you later.